The people who pick our crops and clean our office buildings, who labor in poultry farms and meatpacking plants, who wash the dishes after we eat in restaurants and work the night shifts in hospitals, they may not be citizens or have the proper documentation. But the vast majority of immigrants are not criminals.
Do you know there's a legal process to get into America? Right? Many people follow it. It's actually an insult to people that waited in line, who waited 10 years, like some of my aunts and uncles that came from a Dominican Republic and cousins who waited 10 years for their citizenship. And now it's like, oh, well, we should feel bad because other people don't want to go through the process of doing it.
Politics can do strange things to demented people.
Did you catch the bishop's recent political rant disguised as a sermon? Well, Candace Owens' long ago comments are now making the rounds, perfectly dismantling the bishop's claims. It's almost like Candace predicted the nonsense before it even happened. The backlash was so fierce that the bishop's reportedly backpedaling, allegedly apologizing to Trump and the nation for her unsolicited prayer turned TED Talk. But is this true, or just another piece of woke mythology? We've got all the details and receipts, so stay tuned. You won't want to miss this breakdown.
Do you know there's a legal process to get into America? Right? Many people follow it. It's actually an insult to people that waited in line, who waited 10 years, like some of my aunts and uncles that came from a Dominican Republic and cousins who waited 10 years for their citizenship. And now it's like, oh, well, we should feel bad because other people don't want to go through the process of doing it.
This clip may be a bit old and wasn't aimed directly at the bishop, but Candace Owens' comments absolutely hit the mark in response to her controversial sermon. The outspoken former Daily Wire personality made her stance clear. When it comes to immigration, there's a thing called the law, a process with rules, paperwork, and, yes, patience. Candace didn't mince words. Skipping this process isn't just illegal. It's an insult to those who followed the law and waited their turn. She even shared a personal story, revealing that some of her family members endured a grueling 10-year wait to legally immigrate to the U.S. That's a whole decade of patience and hard work. Meanwhile, those who bypass this process, in her view, are spitting on the very idea of fairness and respect for the rule of law. Candace didn't stop there. She made it abundantly clear that people who break the law should face consequences, not get a free pass. In her view, anyone who violates immigration laws should be sent back to their home country, no exceptions. After all, she argues, America shouldn't be in the business of rewarding rule breakers. If you thought Candace was done with her fiery take, think again. This was just the beginning of her no-holds-barred response. Classic Candace. Direct, unapologetic, and fiery, with a personal touch that keeps you hooked.
The thing, I am a big believer that we should help them fix their own countries, right? I'm pro fixing your country. America is not a charity case. We can't take in everybody's problems. When they say refugees bring their problems with them, that's a fact. Whatever you're running from, and if your entire community up and runs and says, oh, there's a bunch of war in this room, so we're all going to get up and commute to the next room, the war is going to be in the other.
Isn't it uncanny how Candace Owens seems to predict the future? Her past remarks don't just take aim at the bishop, they also deliver a powerful blow to her plea to Trump, especially with Candace's unapologetic views on illegal immigration. According to Candace, instead of making concessions for illegal immigrants, America should focus on addressing the root problems in their home countries. Why? Because when people cross the border illegally, they don't just bring dreams and hopes. They often bring unresolved issues that can create chaos within the U.S. Candace nails it with a mic drop analogy. Imagine a room suddenly erupting into war. If everyone fled to a new room, the war wouldn't stay behind. It would follow them. She argues the same principle applies to illegal immigrants, who may bring their country's unresolved problems with them. But wait, Candace's take doesn't end here. Keep listening for more of her no-holds-barred opinion.
think it's really important that we help them, which Trump has been doing, and saying, we'll help you fix your own problems, but we have a lot of people in America that we should be helping first. So people that I feel bad for are the homeless Americans that are living on the street, that have been living there for years, that can't get a place to sleep. When we take care of our own first, then we can talk about what we can do for people that are happening outside the United States.
Candace Owens made it clear that her stance isn't about ignoring human suffering. It's about enforcing the law and maintaining America's stability. Her argument is straightforward. Deporting individuals who violate immigration laws isn't an act of cruelty, but a necessary step. Those pushing for lax immigration enforcement, in her view, are only fueling chaos while pretending to show compassion. True to her style, Candace backed up her position with a blend of sharp logic and humor, leaving no room for the woke crowd or her critics to hide. Whether you agree with her or not, it's hard to ignore that she's speaking to what many people are thinking. America's priority should be taking care of its own citizens first. Just look at the homeless crisis in cities like Los Angeles, where tent cities now outnumber Starbucks locations. These are American citizens who need help, yet the focus seems to be more on importing problems rather than solving the ones already at home. It's like trying to throw a party while your kitchen burns down. Priorities, people. This has been a central point of Trump's message all along. Fix what's broken here before trying to save the world. His words from years ago still resonate. America should first focus on its own issues before trying to solve everyone else's.
Are being released by the tens of thousands into our communities with no regard for the impact on public safety or
Trump's point is clear. Americans should put their own interests first before looking abroad. But to the woke crowd, this seems xenophobic. Why help a hungry veteran in Chicago when you can show off your virtue by opening the borders to someone who hasn't even followed the rules? It's the same crowd that cries about systemic inequality. Yet when Trump suggests prioritizing Americans, they act like he's just banned kale smoothies. Candace Owens hit the nail on the head. This isn't about compassion, it's all about optics. And the bishop and her woke followers, they've mastered the art of optics while failing miserably in common sense. For those who've missed the bishop's controversial sermon, take a moment to listen. Her words only make this whole debate more complicated.
People who pick our crops and clean our office buildings, who labor in poultry farms and meatpacking plants, who wash the dishes after we eat in restaurants and work the night shifts in hospitals, they may not be citizens or have the proper documentation.
Trump's at it.
But the vast majority of immigrants are not criminals.
That was Reverend Marianne Budde, the bishop of the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C., taking aim at Trump while he sat front and center during a prayer service. But Budde didn't stop at criticizing Trump. She also dove into the LGBTQ+ community, claiming they live in constant fear for their lives. This view, popular among the woke crowd, has become as trendy as avocado toast. It's clear Budde used her pulpit to make a political statement on more than one front.
Ask you to have mercy upon the people in our country who are scared now. There are gay, lesbian, and transgender children in Democratic, Republican, and independent families. Some who fear for their lives.
You have to wonder, where exactly is this fear coming from? The average person might say they're more worried about things like rising inflation, the economy, or just trying to make ends meet. Yet, according to Bishop Marianne Budde, it's Trump's mere presence that's supposedly sparking widespread panic among LGBTQ+ individuals. Sure, Bishop Budde, because nothing screams living in fear like discussing safe spaces while sipping organic fair trade coffee in a sanctuary. If we genuinely care about the safety and well-being of the LGBTQ+ community, it might make more sense to focus on real-world issues like violence, discrimination, and mental health, rather than using them as tools for political grandstanding. But, of course, that wouldn't make for a good sermon, would it? Instead, the woke crowd often exaggerates issues, turning small inconveniences into full-blown crises to further their social justice cause. They've mastered the art of creating outrage over minor problems, and for them, it's all about virtue signaling. However, this time, it seems their theatrics weren't going to work on Trump. The man is immune to their attempts to manipulate him. He's been through it all before, and no amount of virtue signaling or dramatic statements is going to faze him. In fact, Trump hit back hard, calling for an apology from the bishop after she painted him as some kind of villain out to harm the LGBTQ+ community. Trump took to Truth Social just hours after the service, writing that the bishop was a radical left hardliner and a Trump hater. He criticized her tone, calling it nasty, and claimed her sermon lacked intelligence and was boring and uninspiring. Trump also took issue with her failure to mention the influx of illegal migrants coming into the U.S. and committing violent acts, including those released from jails and mental institutions. He pointed out that this giant crime wave was a pressing issue that she failed to address. Trump's critique didn't stop there. He emphasized that the bishop's sermon, far from being a moment of spiritual reflection, was nothing more than a political speech. Many online echoed his sentiments, blasting the bishop for turning a prayer service into a platform for woke politics. One social media user called the bishop disgraceful and argued that she shouldn't have been given the opportunity to deliver the sermon, labeling her as more of an activist than a religious leader. Another person remarked that the event was more of a political speech than a Christian service. Even those outside religious circles weighed in, expressing disappointment at the sermon's tone. One non-religious commenter said they found her statements disrespectful and dishonorable. On the other hand, Trump's supporters praised his response, with some noting how gracious he was in allowing the bishop to air her grievances without retaliation. They commended his grace and patience, contrasting it with the aggressive rhetoric of the bishop. However, not everyone was so kind. One fan of Trump said their church would call her a false prophet, and they agreed with that view.
Gender children, which is not a thing. Yeah. That is a made-up thing. Those are kids who are dealing with, most likely, their parents' mental illness, but in some cases, their own societal struggles, who need therapy from someone who's objective and not trying to push them out of their biological sex, which is not possible.
Once again, a pressing question remains. Are children's lives truly at risk just because Trump took office? The woke crowd, as usual, is fueling fear and exaggerating crises that don't exist, with the bishop at the forefront of this movement. As Megyn Kelly pointed out, many of these children are victims of irresponsible parenting, allowing kids to transition when they're still at an age where they believe in the tooth fairy. But let's not forget the bishop's role in all of this. Instead of focusing on prayer and spirituality, the bishop seems to be using her platform to push an LGBTQ+ agenda. The National Cathedral, once a sacred space for worship, is turning into what feels more like a mouthpiece for woke propaganda. Worse yet, some of these children might not have even considered transitioning on their own, but were pushed into it by parents eager to be seen as progressive. Perhaps the bishop could spend less time twisting religion to fit her political views, and more time genuinely advocating for children's well-being. After all, with her ever-expanding role, priest, politician, and now self-appointed gender expert, she seems to be stretching herself thin. Maybe it's time to refocus on the true purpose of her position. But hey, what do we know? We're just trying to keep up with her ever-growing job description. And with that, we're wrapping up today's video. Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more content.